All right, we're recording this time, Austin. Welcome to the Wolverine.com podcast, everybody. This is the Maize and Blue Breakdown with Austin Fox. I'm Clayton Sayfie. Lots of news this week that we will get into. We'll start with some football stuff. Mike Hart, obviously, a home run hire in our book, at least in mine. Austin, we'll talk about that. For the running back spot, Mike McDonald looks like he's going to be the defensive coordinator from Baltimore. And then another name emerging on the defensive backs coaching front that we will discuss as well. And then, of course, why bury the lead? Why, you know, Michigan basketball is incredible right now, 11-0. Huge win over number 9 Wisconsin. They were up 40 at one point. They end up winning by 23, but a dominant victory. Like I said, continues to be undefeated atop the Big Ten. So we'll get into all of that here. Remember to check our content out at thewolverine.com with the promo code Blue60 for 2 months of our premium content for free. But Austin, the news comes down yesterday. First of all, Chris Ballas from the Wolverine.com, our senior editor, was kind of the first to report that Mike Hart had an offer on the table, and it kind of happened pretty quickly. By the end of the business day, he is officially being announced as Michigan's running backs coach. Your reaction kind of when all the news came down yesterday. This guy's coming home, man. Fun to watch as a player and can't wait to watch him as a coach.
I'll admit I was a little bit surprised when I heard about the news. People knew about the beef that he had with Jim Harbaugh way back in, I believe it was right around 2007 or so, but that's ancient history, man. The fences have clearly been mended, and it's great to see Mike Hart come home. I'm excited about this hire, not because he's an outstanding Michigan man and one of the best players in Michigan history, but because of his track record as a head coach. He's proven, man, even though he's only 34 years old, what he did at Indiana the past few years has been extremely impressive. He coached there since 2017. He did a good job with Morgan Ellison, Indiana's running back, his first year on the job. And then in 2018, he helped lead Stevie Scott, an unheralded 3-star running back at a high school, to a 1,000-yard season. And that's something you don't see very often from freshmen in the Big Ten. So he's produced Stevie Scott into an exceptional Big Ten back. I talked about the job he did with Morgan Ellison. So I'm excited about this Mike Hart hire, man. I think that he's going to recruit very well. People are going to be excited to play for him. And I really think that that's something that Jim Harbaugh is trying to do with this Michigan program. Get a little bit younger on that staff, get some energetic, enthusiastic young guys who are going to recruit at a high level. And in a lot of ways, I think this is a slam dunk hire. And I think it's going to pay dividends for this Michigan program and for the Michigan running backs moving forward.
Yeah, and it was kind of like heading into this staff shakeup following the season. It was kind of one of those names where it's like, all right, it's probably time to go get Mike Hart. Now, I've been a little more of a defender of Jay Harbaugh than a lot of people. I think he's done a good job recruiting, certainly, undeniably done a good job recruiting. I think there has been good running back play here. The rotation last year was super weird, and that was obviously cause for some, concern on what was going on there because you got Hassan Haskins, 1 rush against Wisconsin, then 22 the next week, and obviously was the best running back on that team. So it was puzzling at times. But can you upgrade at that position? Absolutely. Michigan just did with Mike Hart. But going back to the beef that you called, I think that was so overblown back in 2007. First of all, it was overblown what Jim Harbaugh said when he was at Stanford. All he said was that, he was kind of boasting a little bit about how many different majors his guys at Stanford were majoring in throughout the football team, and that they had, guys going into the, pre-med program, guys that were going to be engineers, and on and on and on. And he said basically that he was talked out of being a history major while he was at Michigan because it was too much reading and too much work, and it would kind of take away from football. And, I think those comments got taken a little bit. I'd say they got overblown. I don't know if they were necessarily out of context. And then Mike Hart gets asked about it. He's a passionate player that protects the program. Everyone knows that, Mike Hart is that type of guy who's fiery and is going to defend the program. He gets asked about it as a college student. And he said some things, I wish he never played here. He's not a Michigan man, whatever. But I don't know. I think it's overblown. We'd heard that, they had been in contact in the past talking about some, job opening. So it's certainly water under the bridge. And it's good to have a guy like that home if you're Michigan because, like you said, younger, more energetic. We kind of heard I talked to Paul Gable of the Indiana rival site, and basically he gave me the rundown on his thoughts on Hart when he was there. Very good recruiter. You mentioned a few of the guys that he's developed, including Stevie Scott, the most recent, and has just done a really good job. He was promoted to associate head coach this past season. Obviously, a very good leader, trusted by Tom Allen, is going to be a guy that you want in the ears of your players. He's going to be a guy you want in the ears of the rest of your coaching staff. So, really, to use a Jim Harbaugh term, A++ across the board with this hire.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad that you brought up the comments that were made back in 07 again, and water under the bridge is a good way to put it. I don't even know why I brought it up in the first place. I think it was blown way out of proportion.
Well, yeah, it's certainly relevant when you mention those two names together, because that is kind of their one piece of history. Harbaugh played in the 80s, Mike Hart played in the mid 2000s. So, and they both went to Michigan. That would be their only connection. There was obvious headlines there, and everyone kind of knew about that beef. So, I think bringing it up is absolutely fair. But if they got over it, I'm certainly believe that people can kind of look past that and realize that it really probably was overblown and is water under the bridge.
Exactly. You really put it in perspective. It's important to remember that in 2007, Mike Hart was a senior in college. So what, a 22-year-old kid? And that was 14 years ago. So in a lot of ways, it is ancient history. You said it best when you said Mike Hart was a passionate and energetic player. He was asked about it, and that was his response. So I have no issue whatsoever. And again, I think it's just best to let bygones be bygones. So Mike Hart understands perfectly what it means to be a Michigan man. He epitomized it during his time here. He led Michigan to a Big Ten title as a freshman in 2004. He had Michigan on the verge of a national title as a junior in 06. He's the school's all-time leading rushers, one of the best players ever to play here, arguably the best player I've ever seen put on a Michigan uniform. I'm a little too young to remember Charles Woodson, so I think it's important to point that out, but this is a slam dunk hire. He's going to help put guys in the NFL. Guys are going to want to play for him. Again, I just can't get out of my mind what he did at Indiana because I think that was incredibly impressive. So again, he's really that Michigan energy and that mindset that you need to coach here. And honestly, that's been lacking a little bit surrounding the football program in recent years. So I think that we're really going to see running backs flock here in a lot of ways, exceptional running backs. Jay Harbaugh got a little bit more criticism, I think, than he deserved. Like you said, he did recruit some really good backs, Zach Charbonnet and Blake Corum being two that come to mind right away. But I think this is a significant upgrade, and I'm really excited to see what Mike Hart does with this group here next year.
I can't wait till the NFL draft in 1, 2, 3 years, whenever it is, when a Michigan running back gets taken, and the whole narrative will be about how, first guy since Mike Hart, and Mike Hart had to produce the guy to get the guy, first guy since Mike Hart, running back to be selected in the NFL draft from Michigan. It's crazy that he's the last guy. And you need that kind of NFL talent. You can talk all you want about, the fact that Michigan has a quote unquote loaded running back room with those guys you mentioned, Hassan Haskins, Zach Charbonnet, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards coming in, but are they NFL talents? I mean, it remains to be seen. I think Mike Hart can help those guys get there, but you got to develop them into that. And you talk about kind of younging up the coaching staff. Mike McDonald on the defensive side of the ball looks like he'll be the defensive coordinator. He's the linebackers coach for the Baltimore Ravens right now, and they're obviously in the midst of a playoff run. They'll take on Buffalo this Saturday, I want to say, and they won on Sunday against Tennessee. But so, I think that kind of creates some problems because you want him to get right out on the recruiting trail. At the same time, Jim Harbaugh is obviously rooting for Baltimore and his brother John Harbaugh there. But I like the Mike McDonald hire in the sense that I like that he's on the staff, as a defensive coordinator. He has a lot to prove. There's no doubt about that. He hasn't called plays. But he's a very good coach, and I will mention that Don Martindale, the current defensive coordinator at the Ravens, was promoted a few years ago from the linebacker spot, showing, that they have a big role in that defense and, that they can kind of move up and run an entire defense, including at the NFL level with Martindale and then now at the college level with McDonald. So kind of, what are your thoughts on this? Because you get rid of Don Brown and he was kind of a proven hire when he came in. He never had the huge gig, but it was like, okay, this guy can coach. defense. He can coordinate a defense. He knows what he's doing. Mike Macdonald, everyone knows he's a very good coach and everyone speaks highly of him, but he's not as proven, but at the same time, you could be going for kind of that younger type of up and comer and kind of taking your shot on that guy and assuming that he is going to be that star that he's, kind of showing that he could be.
Yeah, this might be kind of a boring answer, but I don't really have an opinion on this because we don't know much about him. He could be a huge success or he could be a failure. He's never been a defensive coordinator, and his track record is incredibly small. He's very young, so he really hasn't been coaching all that long. You talked about how he's the linebackers coach with the Ravens. He worked with their secondary as well. He was a GA at Georgia for a little bit and helped coach linebackers there as well, fresh out of college, I believe, in 2011 and 2012. So, again, we just don't know much about him because the sample size is so small. I'm not going to criticize the hire. I think, again, it's that trend that Jim Harbaugh is kind of going for, young, energetic guys who will hopefully recruit well. I like that McDonald is coached in the South at Georgia, and I'm sure has plenty of ties there because Georgia is one of the most talent-rich states in the country when it comes to high school football. So I do think he'll do a good job. The fact that I'm sure John Harbaugh recommended him to his brother Jim probably played a factor here. The two undoubtedly talked about him a lot. So John Harbaugh obviously knows how to coach football and coach defense. And if he is backing up Mike Macdonald in that regard, then I'm all for it. I do kind of like it. It's not, I think it's going to work out pretty darn well. That's just my gut feeling on it. We'll see what happens. Only time will tell. But for those criticizing it and saying you can't take a chance on a guy that's never been a defensive coordinator here, well, guess what? Every great coach in the country has been in that position at some point. So you got to start somewhere. And I'm all for Jim Harbaugh giving this guy a chance.
Yeah, you can't be a defensive coordinator before you're a defensive coordinator.
Exactly. Well put.
And, it's fair to be concerned about that. I think I even said this on our message board. Someone was talking about, hey, don't be worried about this hire. And I said, I think that I speak for a lot of people in that I don't think they're necessarily worried. I mean, I think it's fair to be worried if you're a fan. You can feel however you want. Concerned, yes, though. Absolutely concerned. And by the way, when I'm a fan of a team, I'm concerned or worried every week going into a game. I'm concerned about every aspect. It's just the way you are as somebody who's invested. So it's fair to be those things, but obviously, it looks like it could pay off, and it could pay off huge. It could be a great hire when it's all said and done. It's one of those things when, like, you said, it's hard to have an opinion on it. You kind of got to wait and see until it comes to fruition and you see the product on the field. At least let's wait till he gets introduced and maybe speaks publicly as Michigan's defensive coordinator, and we can start talking about different aspects of what he wants to do, what the vision is, et cetera, et cetera. And he may be bringing a guy with him, Austin. Jesse Minter is a name that's kind of emerged that it looks like he's going to get a shot as Michigan's secondary coach or a coach in the secondary, whether that's both the corners and the safeties or one or the other. You'd assume probably the corners if it's one. But he's done a good job there. He was the defensive coordinator previously for 11 years at Georgia State. So he's another guy with Southern ties, another guy with some college experience, more than McDonald, and has worked with corners and secondary players in Baltimore, which is known for having very good guys. Obviously, you can go down the list of some of the legends there for the Ravens in their defensive backfield. So they have a strong culture there. You mentioned John Harbaugh being a guy that knows his football, a guy that would write a great letter of recommendation for these guys. And, I'm sure it's just a phone call or whatever to give his recommendation to his brother. But another younger guy, this guy a little more experienced. Your thoughts, kind of just gut reactions. Obviously, we don't know a ton about him at this point because we're recording this just after his name has kind of emerged in the last 24 hours or so.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat on Jesse Minter as I am in Mike Macdonald. We really don't know a ton about him, so I don't think it's a bad move, but I'm not going to praise the move significantly either. I think it could pay dividends. You know what? If John Harbaugh is recommending a guy like this to his brother Jim, then I think that's pretty telling, and that's a pretty high encouragement right there. So I don't know. I think he'll do a good job. Mike Zordich, Michigan's previous corners coach, assuming he won't return, has done an excellent job during Jim Harbaugh's entire tenure in Ann Arbor. And if he is on his way out, I hate seeing him go, man, because in my opinion, he was the best coach on the staff since Harbaugh got there in 2015. And the corner play was consistent. They were consistently great, with the exception of this past season. So it's hard to imagine Jesse Minter being an upgrade. Again, I say that with a grain of salt because we don't know a lot about him. But time will tell on this hire, man. But the fact that he has coached outstanding corners in Baltimore under John Harbaugh is pretty encouraging. And I think when it's all said and done, he'll do a pretty darn good job in Ann Arbor.
Yep. And we should mention, you mentioned Zordich. I agree on him. I really like him, not only as a coach and what he's done and what his track record is, but as a guy as well. And then Jay Harbaugh, who we've kind of talked about with the running backs, looks like he's going to stay on staff and just be the special teams coordinator. And then you would shuffle some things around. It looks like Jim Harbaugh, there's a good chance that he will just coach the quarterbacks himself. So you got to make those numbers work, and we'll see what they do. Do they hire, with Mike Macdonald being a linebackers coach, you already have Brian Jean-Mary in there. Do they, tag team the linebackers? Mike Macdonald has secondary experience. Could he be one of the secondary coaches as well as the D coordinator? You got to kind of, shift the numbers around a little bit, especially if you want to bring in another offensive coach, which is a possibility. And I think there's a chance that they do that. Maybe even somebody that will have a hand in some play calling, or, you keep your guys there. You let Josh Gattis continue to run the offense, or you bring in a guy like Ed Warner or Mike Hart to be maybe the de facto run game coordinator. Who knows? There's kind of limitless options. I think they're kind of weighing all of that right now. But, yeah, it'll be interesting as this staff shakeup becomes a little more clear, seems by the week. Things moving a little bit more fast here as things go forward. But should we get into some hoops?
Absolutely, man. I think this is the topic that everyone's been waiting to hear about.
Absolutely, yeah. So before we do that, we'll remind you that this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there's never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you're guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 five-star reviews. Give Chris Sabanish a call at 480-562-6267 or email him directly at csabanish@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending Incorporated, equal access lender, licensed in over 40 states. www.jfqlending.com. So, Austin, this Michigan basketball team is incredible right now and looks like it could be the best team in the country. It's at least a top 3 team in the country right now. But let's talk about the win over Wisconsin specifically. Number 9 Wisconsin. You wouldn't know it if you saw the final score. You wouldn't know it if you would have, tuned in for the second that Michigan was up 40, but that just doesn't happen against a top 10 team. That just doesn't happen against Wisconsin. They don't let anyone go on runs. Michigan went on a 43-6 run from midway through the first half to midway through the second half. It's unheard of type stuff. This is a good Michigan team. This is a very good Michigan team that is now firmly, we've been talking about it for a couple weeks. Are they a team that can contend for a Final Four? Absolutely. Will they? We'll see. It looks like now they're going to. You knock on wood if you're a Michigan fan, but things can change between now and then. But right now, I've never seen a team at this point in the season play this well. To be completely honest, and look like they're, basically a flawless team at this point. The way they've been playing the last 3 games, 3 straight games. Wins over ranked opponents, first time anyone's done that and won by 19 or more points. So you can go on and on about this team and what they've done over the first 11 games.
Yeah, you really can. I was at Chrysler the other night for that Wisconsin game, and there were media people there talking about this Michigan basketball team during that 43-6 run, saying that they've never seen anything like that in regards to an impressive performance like that. And these are people who had been to Final Fours and seen some of the best teams in the country. I don't think most of the college basketball world had ever seen a performance like that. It wasn't like Wisconsin was some slouch. It was men against boys out there, varsity against the JVs, whatever term you want to use for it. Michigan dominated that game in every aspect, and that's something that simply doesn't happen to Wisconsin. I believe the last time they lost a game by 30 was 2002, if I'm not mistaken. Michigan obviously only won by 23, but they were up by 40 at one point in that game, 69-29. So the job Juwan Howard is doing so far this year with this group is nothing short of amazing. People talk about Baylor and Gonzaga having separated themselves from the rest of the college basketball world, but I don't think that's accurate. I think Michigan is on pace with them or even better than those teams. We simply don't know at this point. The level of competition obviously isn't at a high level for Gonzaga night in and night out. Granted, I know they've beaten Iowa and West Virginia and Kansas, but at the same time, I think Michigan is just as good as those two teams, Baylor and Gonzaga, that is, if not better. So it'll be interesting to see if this Michigan team can continue on this pace. They're bound to lose some games eventually. We've said that several times on the podcast over the past few weeks, but the real question is how long can they sustain this incredible pace that they're currently on, because they haven't shown any signs of letting up so far. People love to talk about their offense and how good they are. They're the best shooting team in the country among power conference teams. They're shooting 52.4% on the year. But their defense deserves just as much credit. They're the third best defense nationally in terms of opponent shooting percentage among power conference teams. So I don't know what I'm more impressed with lately. They're both playing at such a high level, and this team really doesn't have any weaknesses. It's hard to pick this team to lose against anybody right now. They play at Minnesota on Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and you know what? When considering how well they're playing, I expect Michigan to keep the good times rolling and take down yet another ranked opponent on Saturday, which if they get it done, it'll be their fourth straight.
This is where things get real in the Big Ten when you start playing teams for a second straight time, or for a second time. In Minnesota, obviously that will be just that. But teams got to play Michigan again. I mean, if you're Minnesota, you came in there, you were down 37 at one point, and it looked like they wanted to walk right out the tunnel of Chrysler Arena and get back on the bus. And I don't blame them. I mean, I said that last week. I would be probably doing the same thing if I were them. And kind of you'd have that, type of demeanor, because this team will suck the life out of you right now. If you're an opponent, playing Michigan. You mentioned Gonzaga and Baylor. Gonzaga's got a great offense. They have a good defense, very good. Baylor has an incredible defense. They have a very good offense as well. But is Michigan kind of the most complete team? Because we've talked so much about their offense really over the first 6-7 games, and then it's the defense, like you mentioned, has just been suffocating the opponents. And is this the most complete team in the country right now, especially given the level of competition, especially over the last 3 games? Because you look at Northwestern is a team that's going to be on the bubble for the tournament. Minnesota looks like a tournament team. And then Wisconsin's a top 10 team. I don't think, maybe you move them down in the next poll, but I don't think that said a ton about Wisconsin. I still think they're an incredible team. They obviously had a bad night and they weren't able to adjust, but I give Michigan most of the credit for what happened on Tuesday.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that game said a lot more about Michigan than it did about Wisconsin. Wisconsin, to me, is still one of the best teams in the Big Ten and one of the better teams in the entire country. That was just Michigan suffocating them in every aspect, calling Michigan the most complete team in the country. I would have no issue if somebody wanted to do that. Granted, I haven't watched a ton of Baylor and Gonzaga, so it would be inaccurate if I said one of those teams is more complete. But when considering how well Michigan plays on offense, and how well it plays on defense, and it's taken care of the ball better now, and it's one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country. They just don't have any weaknesses. They bring the energy every night, the intensity. Shawnee Brown, as a senior transfer, is just the epitome of what you want in an energizer off the bench. He plays that role so well. When he had that dunk off Isaiah Livers' miss midway through the second half in that game, you could see how fired up he was. He was stomping back down the court. Brandon Johns brings the energy off the bench. The bench as a whole is fired up every game. So I'm just blown away with how well Juwan Howard has these guys playing right now, and I can't wait to see where this thing goes. Again, I can't stress enough, they are going to go through struggles at some point, but their floor doesn't look as low as it once did. I kept saying 14-6 will be good enough to win the Big Ten outright, but you know what, man? This Michigan team might just go 15-5 or even 16-4 with games being canceled now, though I think that kind of throws a wrench into things. Penn State just canceled 4 straight. Michigan State, it looks like, is on hold, so we don't know how that's going to play out. How's that going to affect the Big Ten title race? It'll be interesting to see if that throws a wrench into things in that regard, but props to Juwan Howard and this Michigan coaching staff and these players for buying in, because they are 100% a culture. They know what it means to wear that Michigan uniform and play for Michigan every single night, and they know it's about their brothers and their teammates, and it's about the name on the front of the jersey and not the back.
The bench, like you talked about, is incredible. When I'm at these games, I find myself, when they're on defense, almost watching the bench like the same amount as I'm watching the game. You kind of glance back and forth. They're chanting, they're doing everything. Like, they have more fun than any team I've ever seen. And they're able to move around on the bench. Like, someone hit a three, and you got Jace Howard and like CJ Baird and those guys literally running around the bench area. They have more room now because there's no fans in the stands. So they move those bleachers back behind the bench, and they have the bench spread out. Obviously, it sucks there's no fans, but it's an incredible display of what this culture is. The culture is the perfect word to describe it. It's probably been said about this Michigan team more than any team in the country, or than I can remember in past years too. But you have to keep saying it because it is something that's on display. There's a strong culture here. There was, a little bit of concern after John Beilein left. How is Juwan Howard going to come in? Is he going to? He's going to recruit well, but some of the top tier kids he gets, how are they going to mix with the Michigan culture and the way things have been established for 13 or 12 years under John Beilein? It's been masterful. It's been absolutely beautiful to watch it all come together. But on the fans aspect, would that have been the loudest during that 46-5 run? And you had the Sean D. Brown putback dunk, I think would have been the loudest I'd ever heard Chrysler if there were fans in there. I think it could have been the loudest Chrysler had ever gotten. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think that's a stretch at all. I said on the podcast a few weeks ago that beatdown of a really good North Carolina team in November of 2018 was the loudest I'd heard Chrysler, specifically on Charles Matthews' breakaway dunk late in the first half. Diehard Michigan fans will remember the exact play I'm talking about. That was, I think, the single loudest moment I'd ever heard Chrysler Center. The game against number 1 Arizona way back in December of 2013 being number 2 on that list. Before Michigan fell right at the end to Arizona when they were ranked number 1 in the country. But yeah, I think the big run Michigan went on the other night against Wisconsin probably would have taken the cake. It was just all energy and passion among the 40 or so family members who were there, the Michigan parents and brothers and sisters and whatnot. They were having a field day. Chrysler Center basically turned into one big party at that point. And there were so many memorable plays during that stretch. Sean D. Brown's dunk off of Isaiah Livers' miss might take the cake, but there were so many three-pointers in transition. I know Eli Brooks had one in transition. Livers did in transition that I think would have brought the house down as well. I think the defensive plays would have even brought the house down. There was one play that summed it up perfectly, and that was the final play of Wisconsin's possession before the half when Aleem Ford couldn't even get a shot off because of how nasty and how stingy the Michigan defense was. They were entirely in his face. The cameras caught Isaiah Livers with just an all business look on his face walking off the court as Michigan held Wisconsin without a shot on that final possession. So that really summed up the night, and that shows how nasty the Michigan defense is. They take so much pride on that side of the ball, and what a shame that more fans couldn't have been there on Tuesday night at Chrysler, because that would have been one of the loudest and one of the best basketball environments that we've ever seen.
Yeah, and just going into some of the stats from this game, I'm looking at the box score, and we kind of broke this down in some articles too. Like, Demetric Trice got 20 points on 7 of 13. He hit 4 threes on 7 attempts, but he only had, I think, 7 points in the game's first 35 minutes, I believe, or 34 minutes. So Eli Brooks, hats off to him. Sean D. Brown was frustrating him. And then I want to shout out Mike Smith, a kid who we've talked about as kind of the proverbial weak link on Michigan's defense. They do try to hide him, in some matchups, and we've talked about that. And you have to, because I'll be honest, he's not a great defender. He battled against Brad Davison and shut him down. And it started early in the game. I think it was Wisconsin's second possession where they posted Davison right up on him. And Mike Smith kept his ground, contested the shot, was straight up, maybe flopped a little bit, but it didn't matter. They didn't call anything in the ball. It was an air ball from Davison at the end of the shot clock. Davison finished with 2 points, 1 of 8 shooting. and he was shut down by Mike Smith. Other guys were on him as well. Sean D. Brown had a couple possessions where he frustrated the hell out of him, and Sean D. Brown will do that to just about everybody. They've bought in on that end of the floor. Sean D. Brown's a kid who started for, I think, 2-3 years at Wake Forest, and then now is coming off the bench and has bought into that role. Franz Wagner, we talked about his struggles about 3 weeks ago. That feels like distant memory to me, Austin. I mean, he's looking like that lottery type pick in the last 5 games that we thought he could be coming into the year. We'll see if he gets there, but he is certainly rising, and it was I think it was just uncharacteristic. He was just in a little bit of a funk to start the year, but he is, I mean, his length on defense and the things he can do offensively, the way he can get past guys, get in the lane, his long strides. I mean, it's like he does things on the floor other teams can't stop and other players in the country can't do.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think it was on last week's podcast, we talked about how many steals and deflections it seems like Wagner gets, and that was on full display once again against Wisconsin. He had 4 steals. I feel like that's something you just don't see very often. He had a double-double with 10 boards. This Michigan team as a whole blocks so many shots and gets so many steals. I believe they blocked 9 shots and got 6 steals against Wisconsin. So that just shows you how much they're disrupting passing lanes. And you talked about Mike Smith. He's only 5'11". Brad Davison is 6'4". So he had a significant height advantage on him. And like you said, Davison only shot, 1 of 8 for the game, I believe. Nate Reavers, the guy.
And Mike Smith is not 5'11" either.
You're saying that's pretty generous?
Oh, yeah. I think they're including his hair.
The hair gives him an extra 2 inches.
Right. So. I think he's closer to 5'9" or 5'10". He's a tiny guy, and he battles like crazy. What a good pickup him and Sean D. Brown were off the transfer portal.
I'm glad you brought that up, too, because I actually had an MSU fan text me during the game saying, I cannot believe how well these Michigan transfers have blended and gelled so far with this Michigan team. Sean D. Brown and Mike Smith specifically, but another newcomer and Hunter Dickinson, they have blended in flawlessly, and that's a credit to Juwan Howard. All these guys have bought in. Sean D. Brown was a 3-year starter at Wake Forest, and now he's coming off the bench and only playing 19 minutes a game, and yet he's bought into his role beautifully. He's a 3-point shooter. He's right around 40% on the year and is a lights-out defender, and that's really all they need him to be. Mike Smith averaged 22 a game last year at Columbia, and now he's a facilitator. But again, that's all they need him to be. Oh, and he's shooting 46% from 3 on the year. So everybody understands their role, and they play it beautifully, and that's one of the main reasons Michigan is one of, if not the best team in the country right now.
Yeah, and we'll see what they can do going forward. So Saturday against Minnesota, I have Michigan winning. I think that let me look at KenPom. What's the percentage here of chance that Michigan wins? They do this, and I have a feeling that with Minnesota's going to have a better chance. So 65% chance for a Michigan win. I'll say I think it's like a 60% chance. I do think that Minnesota with 6 days off, which they have, is going to be pretty dangerous. They want some revenge. You got to be able to do that in the Big Ten when teams want their revenge. We've seen it with Michigan, where the guys will talk about after a game. Yeah, we really wanted that one. There's something to that in the Big Ten, especially when you lose on the road the first time around and you come to their building, or you host a team that they just beat you. They come in and you beat them back. So that's going to happen at some point this year, like you said. But at the same time, is there a team in the country, maybe outside Gonzaga, or we'll say a power conference team, that has a better shot of actually going undefeated? Maybe is Baylor, but there's not many left. So to say that they can't would be untrue. They are one of the few teams that physically can go undefeated, since they currently are.
Yeah, if we're talking about power conference teams in that regard, Baylor and Michigan are the only 2 remaining unbeaten power conference.
Okay, so I was spot on then.
yeah, exactly. And then I think we have 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken, outside the power conference, Gonzaga obviously being one. I would give Baylor a better chance of going undefeated simply because of how tough the Big Ten is and the fact that the Big Ten is significantly better than the Big 12. That doesn't mean that Baylor's a better team than Michigan. I don't know that they are. I haven't seen enough of Baylor to know that. But there's no doubt in my mind Michigan won't go undefeated simply because of how many difficult games they have left. I would love to say that they're going to go 38-0 or whatever it would play out to this year, seeing as how they've already had a game or 2 canceled. but they're bound to drop a game or two somewhere along the line. I'll say this: if Michigan keeps playing at the level they're currently at, they absolutely will go undefeated. Nobody's going to beat them with them playing at this level, but I don't think they can sustain it, and I think they're bound to come back to reality at least a little bit.
Insert the boo this man gif at you.
Bring it, man. I'm just telling it like it is and calling it like I see it. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see this team go undefeated. Here's a trivia question for you, Clayton, and anybody listening. Who's the last team in college basketball to finish the entire season undefeated through the NCAA tournament?
Jeez, I should probably know this. Not the Kentucky team. I don't know. I think you're going to take me back to probably the 90s or 80s or something. Who is it?
Further back, Indiana under Bobby Knight went 32-0. I want to say in 1976. People can correct me if I'm wrong. That's the last team to go through the entire season, including the postseason, undefeated. So that goes to show you just how difficult it is and how much of a grind it is.
And who'd they beat in the title?
Do you know the answer?
Michigan, right?
Yeah, Michigan. Yep.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah, it does. One of Michigan's many, many, many appearances in the national title where they came up just short, 92 and 93, 2013, 2018, 1965, 1976. It's a shame that they have not grabbed one of those many that they've lost because if they would have a second national title under their belt, I think people would be very close to calling them one of the blue bloods in the sport.
That 76 title game was loaded. I think there's double-digit guys that went to the NBA out of that and guys that contributed and played in the NBA too. So that was incredible. But yeah, this is a team that will go undefeated, I will predict. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I know I'm with you. I was just trying to throw some shade on you there because, you were quick to point out that they won't go undefeated. I agree with you. At the same time, they can. I remember this from the Big Ten Elite documentary on the 2013 team that started out 13-0, I want to say, right?
16.
16?
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Yep, because then they broke it a couple years ago when they went 17-0. So, and I remember LaVale Jordan saying, it's hard to go undefeated, but we might have a chance. And that's kind of the feeling I think now. And, obviously they're not going to, but they might have a chance.
Sure. Never say never. Again, if they continue playing at this level, then sure, they'll go undefeated. But I don't know if we've seen a team play at this high level for over the span of an entire season since that Kentucky team in 2015 came darn close. They were 38-0 before falling to Wisconsin in the Final Four. So that's about as close as you're going to get. And that team was absolutely loaded and played at a high level for a lot of that year. But again, if that Kentucky team couldn't do it, then I think that shows you that, in my opinion, nobody ever will again in college basketball.
Before we finish, can we talk about Hunter Dickinson not making the Wooden watch list for Player of the Year? I mean, you look at anything else, everyone else has him as like a top 5 player in college basketball. I think if the season ended today, he'd be a first-team All-American. He's certainly going to be a first-team All-Big Ten guy. You saw him struggle just a little bit, didn't get some great, the touches he usually gets in the first half, but he always, kind of figures things out. And Michigan ran the pick and roll a couple, times with Mike Smith and Hunter Dickinson, which is becoming an increasingly, bigger weapon that Michigan has in its arsenal now that Mike Smith is just continuing to acclimate himself to this offense. But he got absolutely snubbed.
So Hunter Dickinson is averaging, 17.5 points a game and well over 7 boards and shooting 70% from the field, and you're telling me that he's not one of the best players in the country? I think
it was top 20. Yeah, I think it was a top 25 list, too. It might have been 50. Like, did they just forget about it? I mean, sometimes that happens, right? I mean, how is that possible?
That's flat out comical, in my opinion. That's an absolute joke. And I'm going to go on one of my get off my lawn old man rants here. I think there's way too many awards and way too many watch lists in college basketball, and I put sports in general, and I don't put any stock into them. And this is the exact reason why. What an absolute joke. Anyone who actually buys into this and doesn't think Hunter Dickinson is one of the best players in the country obviously hasn't watched much college basketball so far this year. So absolute joke, and I couldn't care less what a lot of these awards and what these watch lists think.
I'm with you. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I like those, you like to see guys recognize it's like, okay, yeah, these are the top teams. It's interesting to look at times, but you can't put much stock in it if they don't put Hunter Dickinson in. You just can't. I mean, I don't know what they're watching at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, that shows you how flawed it is. And you could say the same thing for the polls and the AP poll and the voting and how flawed that is a lot of the time. It really doesn't mean anything. And I wish people wouldn't put as much stock into it as they do. The Wooden list must have simply forgot Hunter Dickinson and then glossed over his name when they were making this list. That's really the only explanation, unless they really are that clueless.
Come on, John Wooden. What are you thinking?
John Wooden from the grave, man. He's been gone for a while by now, so I'll give him a pass. But people who actually made this list deserve a lot of criticism because that's just flat out stupid on their part.
Yep, for sure. He continues to impress, and obviously he's like really that key piece that I think has unlocked everything else for Michigan. They were going to be a good team. It looks like in hindsight, if he played like a freshman, they have a chance to continue to be a great team throughout the rest of the season. Now that he's playing like a junior or senior, as John Beeline has put it in some of his breakdowns, so incredible to watch. Obviously, game against Minnesota is big on Saturday. We'll recap that next week and talk about this Michigan basketball team. We'll talk about the hires that Jim Harbaugh makes if he a couple more of them become official in the next week or so. Remember to head to the Wolverine.com, use the promo code BLUE60 for 2 months of the premium content for free. We'll see everybody next time.